When I first joined IMO in 2003, the hotspots really were the Straits of Malacca and Singapore and the South China Sea.
So MOWCA was kind of like one of the very first institutional setup
MOWCA was basically the Ministers of Transport.
dealing with the issue of sea blindness.
Well, it's certainly sea blindness. Yeah, I mean, it's also an element of wealth blindness.
Right.
Yeah,
And Robbery
The
likes
book-
to put it that way. Sea
I
blindness.
steal Ian Ralby's ideas all the time. He steals mine. It's a fair swap.
I want to ask you about want us to just look at Somali piracy situation. Would you describe that as a land security issue?
Piracy is a crime.
Yeah.
It's just a crime. It's quite a long argument. That's why I'm very keen to work again with MOWCA and get that economic message up the chain into the African Union.
Hi, Chris. Good morning. And
Morning.
It's a pleasure. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on the Cabin Tea podcast. I'm just going to do a quick run on your background. You are currently the Deputy Secretary General of the Interpol Police.
Yep.
But you've also held very high-level positions in the International Maritime Organization since 2003 as a maritime security specialist, serving as head of section, senior deputy director in November 2014, special advisor to the Secretary General on Maritime Security and Facilitation. And then in 2018, you were appointed Chief Subdivision for Maritime Development within the Technical Cooperation Division. And then later becoming the Acting Director of the Technical Cooperation Division in 2020. But then also you've been with the International Civil Aviation Organization, and you are also a visiting lecturer at the World Maritime University. How did you get into all of these?
Okay, thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to talk to you. I started off in the mid-'80s as a customs officer at Heathrow Airport, initially in air cargo, and then on passenger control, and then on a drugs team, narcotic stuff in Terminal 4 at Heathrow. At the same time as I joined customs, I also joined, we have a volunteer reserve in the Royal Navy in the UK. And so I joined the Navy as a reservist, got to sea on patrol boats and minesweepers. That then got me into customs patrol boats. And so a bit of maritime background as well. I then got promoted, sent to a tax office, which wasn't for me. And I transferred to the expanding department within the Department of Transport dealing with aviation security.
Right.
And this was post-Lockerbie in the 90s, which was introducing new air cargo agent regulations in the UK. So I was on a cargo team for a while. Then I got involved in international or overseas stuff. So looking at British airline operations overseas for the government, including visits to Ghana and Lagos and Kano airports. Abuja wasn't open then. And that then got me into a position at the International Civil Aviation Organization, based in Montreal, where I was the Aviation Security Training Officer.
Okay.
The way aviation security works, it's much more top-down than maritime.
Maritime.
So looking at the aviation model, there's quite a lot of emphasis on national level security committees, policies, programs, etc., which was important going forward. After 2001, the maritime industry obviously looked at what happened and said, we got to review what we've done, and expanded on maritime security. And I transferred from ICAO to IMO for the introduction of the International Ship and Port Facility Security Code and the maritime security stuff. So that was 2003.
Okay.
So the initial period was going around countries training trainers, training instructors on how to teach the new generation of port facility security officers, ship security officers, etc. As time went on, that then morphed into other areas, including proliferation, the amendments to the Suppression of Unlawful Acts or SUA Convention, Rome 1988, but also increasingly piracy. When I first joined IMO in 2003, the hotspots really were the Straits of Malacca and Singapore and the South China Sea, so Asia Pacific. But there'd been piracy off the coast of West Africa. IMO had been tracking that since about 1982, 83. But it was ongoing. Somali piracy was just about beginning to get on the radar, with a few attacks on World Food Programme shipping, probably in 2005.
Right.
In 2005, the Secretary General had been, Secretary General had been to Yemen. The Yemenis had asked for a meeting on maritime security for us to do some training there.
So now we're getting into how you got into African maritime governance,
Yeah.
basically. Because now you're talking about the Djibouti Code of Conduct.
Well, I'm looking at sort of go through time-wise,
Okay.
because what's important to remember is what we did in one side of Africa
Yeah.
fed into the other, and vice versa.
Right.
But if I'm diverting off,
No.
but the initial point was we went to in Sana'a in, I think it was April 2005.
Okay.
But thought, well, we've got an opportunity here. Let's not just do a standard training course. Let's get the countries from the region. So we had 10 countries from the Gulf of Aden and Red Sea together. We talked about maritime security, safety, protection of the marine environment, facilitation, looking at a whole sort of picture on maritime, and invited a number of other UN agencies as
Okay.
well. So I had United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. I had UNICRI, which is the Criminal Justice Research Institute.
Yeah.
We also had Interpol. So the idea was to really look at it and go, we could do something here. And the countries were very keen to progress this. And so came up with a proposal for a small regional agreement for the 10 countries, which then fed into the mix. And we did a follow-up meeting in 2006 in Muscat, which came up with a proposal to establish an information sharing center in Sana'a for the region, and other proposals. Also in 2006, having had those ideas, we had been working with the Maritime Organisation of Western Central Africa,
Okay.
MOWCA, under Magnus Adiko at the time. And a predecessor of mine had done a sort of technical cooperation visit,
Okay.
because MOWCA were keen on establishing a Coast Guard network for Western Central Africa.
Okay.
So we went there, worked with MOWCA, came up with the concept of the Integrated Coast Guard Function Network, which is a horrible term, but the emphasis was on function.
Okay.
Many countries in West Africa didn't have a Coast Guard.
Okay.
They had a Navy,
Okay.
or they had a Gendarmerie Maritime, or they had a police force. Or we didn't care whether it was a Navy or the Coast Guard. It was what needs to be done at sea in order to protect the environment, to counter piracy, to counter illegal dumping,
Right.
toxic waste,
Right.
unsafe practices, etc. And so the idea, we had the first meeting there in I think it was 2006 in Dakar,
Right.
which really set the ball rolling on what became in 2008 the Integrated Coast Guard Function Network. Some interesting challenges with that. MOWCA broke the area down into 4 zones, and the idea was that if each zone of 5 countries of their 20 coastal states, once they all signed up to it, they'd move forward.
So MOWCA was kind of like one of the very first institutional setup to look at governance issues in the West Central Africa.
Yeah, MOWCA was basically the Ministers of Transport.
Right.
So it's a maritime organization. So they were working together to improve maritime within West Africa. So obviously, really good idea. And they worked together to try and improve that. And the sort of having that Coast Guard network was with them. And so I worked with them to progress that. But having signed the agreement, in each zone, 4 of the 5 countries signed up to it. Nobody moved forward, and there was a bit of loss of momentum. But I think there was also a challenge, which is that most of the countries in West and Central Africa are primarily land focused. It's about agriculture. There's not a strong maritime tradition. which is why organisations like MOWCA are so important and getting maritime up the agenda. So the Army, the Air Force, sorry,
dealing with the issue of sea blindness.
well, it's certainly sea blindness. Yeah, I mean, it's also an element of wealth blindness.
Right.
Yeah,
And Robbie
The
likes
book-
to put it that way. Sea
I
blindness.
steal Ian Ralby's ideas all the time. He steals mine. It's a fair swap. But yeah, it's that the border isn't the sea. The border's 200 miles that way, and you've got 200 miles of opportunity that isn't managed. It's not exploited is the wrong word. It's not developed enough because people don't understand the potential of it. They don't look at it as a business. And this is the sort of unifying theme throughout all this: is security is there for a purpose. The purpose is to allow wealth to be created, not just there because it's the right thing to do. So that was MOWCA agreement 2008, bubbling on. So one of the challenges was because the navies are relatively underfunded in defence terms, because there's no maritime threat from other countries. Ghana's not going to sail battleships into Lagos Harbour, is it? It tends to be underfunded. And so to try and create a civilian coast guard, the navies are going, hang on a second. So there was a bit of pushback and it lost a bit of momentum. But the idea was there, some really good ideas. By that stage, this is 2005, 2006. In 2005, the Assembly of IMO, which is the governing body, met and said, we have a problem with piracy off the coast of Somalia. We have a problem with World Food Programme ships being security. Please, the Secretary General of IMO, talk to Secretary General of the UN and get the Security Council to do something. Didn't. We moved on. 2007, because the IMO Assembly meets every 2 years, the Assembly then said, we've got a problem with piracy off the coast of Somalia. Secretary General of UN talked to the Security Council, and we need a regional agreement. So looking at and that's where I came in on this. So we looked at what we'd done in Sana'a in 2015, in 2005. We looked at what we'd done in Muscat, 2006. We also looked at what was happening in Asia Pacific. And this was the recap agreement, which was a counter-piracy initiative with a headquarters in Singapore, countries in the region having focal points that talk to their law enforcement agencies. They'd all talk to each other. If there was an incident, everybody in the region knew about it. So because the way it worked was, I've had an attack in my waters, I talk to my focal point then gets on the focal point network. So there's cooperation. So because piracy, defined in UNCLOS, is a universal crime, anybody can establish jurisdiction. And so there was a lot of work there. So we took the ideas from that. We took the existing IMO guidance on regional agreements, what we've done in Yemen, and put it together. And in 2008, went to Dar es Salaam with 20 countries from the region, plus France, and basically worked on the draft of what became ultimately the Djibouti Code of Conduct. Then originally the idea was to have the agreement signed in Sana'a, because it's, giving credit to the Yemenis, they'd started this thing off. But unfortunately there was a bombing in the US embassy in Sana'a. The security situation was tricky, and Djibouti offered to host the meeting instead. So in 2009 we went to Djibouti, and were revised the draft, got an agreement, countries signed it, and that led to, that became the Djibouti Code of Conduct, which was a counter-piracy initiative. The focus had been
Code of Conduct started as a counter-piracy.
Purely counter-piracy. Because that was the focus. That's what IMO had been,
And the Somali piracy.
It was how, countries in the region working together to develop their maritime law enforcement capability, so Coast Guard capability, develop their legal frameworks to allow for prosecution of piracy, to enable law enforcement to operate, sharing information, sharing best practice, and technical cooperation, working together to develop this stuff. And that was the basis of it. It was how can countries in the region protect their own waters, contribute better to the overall international efforts on maritime security and countering piracy. So Somali piracy was different to the piracy we were seeing in West and Central Africa. Somali piracy was about ships going through the Red Sea Gulf. They had about 26,000 ships a year going through, 3 million barrels of oil a day. So there was a strategic threat to the economies of Europe, of the Far East, etc. So there's kind of a lot of international influence. But clearly, the more the countries in the region could contribute to that, the better for everybody. So you saw some major successes coming up with countries like Kenya, Mauritius, Seychelles, revising their legal systems to allow for prosecution of pirates. You saw interagency cooperation at national level. You also saw good civil military cooperation, the international navies.
I want to ask you about want us to just look at Somali piracy situation. Would you describe that as a land security issue? Did it start from land, or it just started right in?
Piracy is a crime.
Yeah.
It's just a crime. It's not special. It's land-based because the pirates operate from land.
Right.
They take the money goes back on land.
Yeah.
So Somali piracy was a symptom of the lack of effective governance in Somalia at the time. Somalia had been in civil war since 1991. There was no effective rule of law ashore. The pirates were able to operate, but Somalia was a sovereign state, so the territorial waters were sovereign.
Right.
So outside powers couldn't go in there without agreement from the government of Somalia. But essentially, it was a criminal activity. It developed. We'd seen, if you look at some of the research from the late 1990s, early 2000s, there was a tie-in between yacht piracy and people smuggling. There's quite a lot of active people smuggling going across the Red Sea, the Gulf of Aden from Somalia into Yemen, into the Arabian Peninsula. If you plot where the yachts were taken, a lot of them were on the direct route. Some of the reports you were getting were, we were attacked by a boat with lots of people in, but only a couple of them had guns. So there's it's that nexus of organized crime, funded from outside, a whole economy built up around it. But once the piracy started, success builds success. And so they started taking bigger ships, and the ransoms were paid, so bigger ships and ransoms. So we went from, in the sort of early 2000s, so $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 for a ship to be released. At the height, I think it's Serious Star was $20 million. It was it was a business. It was an organized criminal business. So yes, and the way to break it, the way it was contained, was through concerted action by merchant shipping to make attacks more difficult. So this was applying IMO guidance, and then industry developed best management practice, which is essentially the same thing but readable and with pictures.
Right.
With a range of measures, from things like speed up, look out the window, use hose pipes, put barbed wire, visible deterrence, right up to having armed guards on board. A range of measures as appropriate.
Private security. Having guards on board, that's private security.
Private security, with or without arms on board. That was a tricky issue that we got involved in. That's a sidebar if you want me to go there. IMO works on consensus.
Right.
It's done by agreement. It's not done by vote. With arms on board, there was no consensus, because the authority for the ship at sea is the flag state. And so flag state law applies. So if the ship's registered in Panama, Panamanian law applies. If it's registered in the UK, UK law applies. Different countries have different laws relating to our weapons. And there was no agreement. There was a whole range from, arms on board, great, to no guns at all. And so, but what IMO did agree on is that seafarers should not be armed. You don't give the crew guns. If you're going to have weapons on board, it's got to be a trained team. And so quite a lot of work was done at IMO on that issue of armed security teams. Should we carry them? Should we not? And that was it's quite a feature of West African counter-piracy as well, because in the Gulf, I mentioned, Somali piracy was piracy as defined in UNCLOS 101. It was at sea, outside of state's jurisdiction.
Okay.
It was going through the Gulf of Aden. Foreign warships were involved. It wasn't an African issue. It was happening in international waters, not domestic waters.
Okay.
At that time, West and Central Africa, most of what was being described as piracy was legally armed robbery against ships. It happened inside states' territorial waters, and therefore the coastal state had jurisdiction.
So piracy is in the high waters.
Yep.
And armed robbery against ships is in the territorial.
Yeah.
So
Piracy is
easy and the territorial.
The ESO doesn't really come into it. Piracy in UNCLOS,
Right.
the UN Convention on Law of the Sea, is defined as being outside of state's jurisdiction.
Right.
And for the purposes of law enforcement, the state's jurisdiction is the territorial waters. Out to 12 miles, essentially.
Right.
Most of what was happening off the coast of Somalia was up to 1,600 miles from Somalia. So it was all at sea in international waters. In West and Central Africa, it was primarily within 12 nautical miles. So from one point of view, it's the same thing. It's armed people coming on board, stealing stuff. But on the other side, it's inside the jurisdiction of that state, so other countries couldn't intervene. Yeah.
Right.
And that was the big difference at the time. So,
Let's look at how eventually the whole Somali piracy and the Djibouti Code of Conduct played out, and then we can go into the Yaoundé Code of Conduct.
Okay.
As well.
Well, as well as the target hardening in the best management practice, there was also a really impressive level of military engagement and cooperation between the militaries and the civilians. And this, I think it's 2008, late 2008, the European Union Naval Force was set up.
Okay.
Based out of Northwood in London, and other NATO were involved. Combined maritime forces operating out of Bahrain also got involved, and then a number of other players. Independent countries were like Russia or Iran or Korea were providing escorts, and so you had this massive interest in this strategic corridor, and a whole process was set up to control that. You had the Maritime Security Centre, Horn of Africa, which was essentially a place where if you were going to operate a ship in the area, you reported into that. You gave them enough information for them to be able to conduct a risk assessment. So if you were a 10,000 TEU container ship with a speed of 25 knots, no pirate's going to touch you. You're just going to go straight through. But if you were a small parcel tanker only capable of doing 10 knots with a low freeboard and a small crew, you're a vulnerable ship. So the Navy's going to look at you more. They also set up a thing called the Internationally Recognized Transit Corridor, which was a route through that put you going through the area of most danger at night grouped together. So you could use whatever naval warships you had to protect the area. It was sanitizing the area rather than protecting individual ships. And that was extremely effective. Also, you had navies looking at ships going, you're not showing visible counter-piracy signs. We can't see any razor wire. We can't see any evidence but talk to the flag state. Flag state talk to you. Drive up compliance. And so that sort of built up. And because of that ability to protect itself, the warships were then able to get a bit more proactive about getting close to the coast of Somalia. And as pirate action groups come out, thank you very much. We'll take your weapons. We'll take your outboard motors. You can have one boat left. Somalia's that way. Off you go again. And so the business model was broken. And that's what caused the middle of 2012 was basically piracy was contained
Right.
from then for a number of years. We've seen it resurge again every now and again, but essentially nothing like it had been up to 2012.
Right.
But of course, everyone's looking at what's going on in Somalia, and people are noticing a bit more what's been going on in West Africa for 30 years. And so the Security Council passed a couple of resolutions in, I think, 2011 and 2012, calling for a regional agreement in West and Central Africa
Right.
to counter not only piracy, but also other maritime crime,
Okay.
which was a good one. And so as IMO went to, I met up with, and I think it was in Senegal, met up with Colonel Dieng,
Yeah.
who was with ECOWAS.
Was.
He was ECOWAS. And Phil Heil from AFRICOM was also there. And we had this conversation. I remember it well, but we were in a sort of cafe somewhere. And we just thought, well, we've got to do this regional agreement, but here's one I did earlier.
You're right.
Djibouti Code of Conduct.
Conduct.
Why don't we use that as the basis? Because it works. Countries are bought into it. And so, but we also had the African Integrated Maritime Strategy 2050,
Right.
AIMS 2050, which articulated a lot of the problems. So taking Djibouti Code, adding in, I mean, this is essential, simply put, but taking Djibouti Code, add in the offences from AIMS 2050, strengthening the bits that we recognise needed improvement in Djibouti Code, for example, national organisation,
Right.
the need for national maritime security committees, the need for that interagency cooperation at government level, the whole head of state buy-in, things like that. So we basically improved it, made it more focused on maritime security. Clearly, I was also interested in maritime security as an enabler for maritime development, going back to the MOWCA days. So some of the lessons from MOWCA went in. That was then, we then worked with ECAS
Right.
and the Gulf of Guinea Commission, and between us agreed that what became the Yaoundé Code of Conduct. It went backwards and forwards as consultation on it, but that was part of the head of states and government meeting in Yaoundé in 2013. So the Yaoundé Code of Conduct was part of it. Then there was regional agreements, and the Yaoundé architecture was a sort of separate thing. So the introduction of the ICC and how it's actually going to be operationalized. But essentially, the Yaoundé Code of Conduct was a wider version of Djibouti Code.
What? Just trying to situate this conversation about the Gulf of Guinea Commission.
Yeah.
Because I understand that it started off as an entity that was established by the oil-producing countries in the Gulf of Guinea to look at how they could make progress in terms of economic development.
Yeah.
But somewhere along the line, it transitioned to become more of for lack of better word, galvanizing political support from member states to push forward on maritime security.
Well, I think there's. I don't know that much about the Gulf of Guinea Commission, other than the prime movers in the region were ECAS and ECOWAS, the regional economic communities.
Okay.
Gulf of Guinea Commission was also there. There was a degree of friction between ECAS, ECOWAS, Gulf of Guinea Commission. But I think it's personalities. I think it was, But the concept of Gulf of Guinea Commission and security to protect the oil industry, it makes perfect sense.
Right.
And also they were a sort of bridge over because they had a foot in both camps, both ECAS and ECOWAS. So, and I think they were specifically mentioned in the Security Council resolutions as well. So, it was none of my business. What I was interested in was what can the countries do as individual countries, and then how can they work together?
Right.
And a lot of the challenges, some of the strengths of the Yaoundé were that it had that political support.
Okay.
You had the REC, so ECAS and ECOWAS actually supporting it. It became part of their policy. the fact we had heads of state, and I was in the room with 13 actual presidents. I've never been so terrified in my life. You could see why some of these guys had been, were presidents and stayed there. But it was, it was a lot of strong characters. They had the representative. Ghana was represented by your foreign minister
Okay.
at the time, lady. It was some backwards and forwards and discussions and basically, but it was agreed
Right.
and signed there, and that sort of set it forward. And then you had this sort of architecture in the region developing.
Right.
They come up with the concept of the ICC, which was really the coordination between the planned for Cresmac and Cresmeo, which were the regional maritime operation centers for ECAS and ECOWAS, respectively. But yeah, that was an interesting time.
Just want us to, I know these are different regions. We have the Djibouti Code of Conduct
Yeah.
for Western Indian Ocean, Gulf of Aden, and then you have the Yaoundé Code of Conduct for Western Central Africa.
Yeah.
These are two different regions. Why? It seems that, well, not it seems, but the Yaoundé Code of Conduct received a lot of interest from the member state, and it was able to progress quite quickly as compared to the Djibouti Code of Conduct. What do you make of that?
I think that's an interesting interpretation, but so Djibouti Code came first because a lot of the member states of IMO were threatened by Somali-based piracy.
Okay.
And, this is 2008, the world economic crisis, the prospect of shutting the Gulf of Aden and ships rerouting around South Africa as they're doing at the moment,
Who were some of these IMO member states?
Well, obviously the European states,
Okay.
because they're dependent on that for their trade.
Yeah.
Japan was a very strong advocate for counter-piracy because Japan has to import most of their raw materials. They see shipping as part of their national interest. Doesn't matter whose ship it is. But in 2008, a Japanese tanker called the Takeyama was hit by a rocket-propelled grenade in the, and that was a Japanese flag one, was hit in the Gulf of Aden. So Japan became very, very interested. But I guess the main difference was that, or is and remains, that the Djibouti Code is largely civilian-led.
Okay.
Because it came out of IMO, per se, it's ministers of transport, it's maritime authorities, with extending out to other agencies and navies. So there's a recognition we can talk about later, but a recognition of the importance of naval engagement. So you now have this working group 3 that deals with that. West Africa, because it came officially, it wasn't an IMO initiative. It was an ECAS-ECOWAS initiative.
Okay.
And because the heads of state were involved, it's driven, and it's much more military focus. It's much more Navy-led.
Right.
And what we're looking for, ideally, in both is a sweet spot between the two. So the civilian control of the transport side, the military providing operational capabilities to support civilian law enforcement.
Okay.
And that's really where I see long-term it going. We also had the MOWCA agreement, so the priority with Djibouti was dealing with the piracy stuff. But and also piracy had been around for a long time. IMO got involved in piracy in I think 1982, 1983 as a result of Sweden going to the IMO Council saying we've got a problem with our ships being attacked off West Africa. And so IMO started collecting statistics, developing guidance on protection of ships against piracy, the need to prosecute offenders, and so on. So there's a long history there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, looking back at how these two agreements have evolved, how would you describe it in simple words? How would you describe the two agreements?
Okay.
There.
What the agreements do, and I looked, well, okay. Just to quick bit of hit. What then happened? Just to square the circle.
Yeah.
Yaoundé Code came in
Yeah.
2013. Piracy contained off the coast of Somalia from mid 2012 onwards, but the countries in the Western Indian Ocean area recognised actually there's quite a lot of strength in what Djibouti Code's done.
Okay.
So we should develop it, and we should make it wider, because actually what they really care about is illegal fishing and maritime crime.
Right.
And so it was the countries decided to expand the scope of it. So we went back to Yaoundé Code, and essentially there's very little difference between the Jeddah Amendment 2017 to Yaoundé Code. So essentially they're the same thing.
Right.
What are they about? They're about creating the conditions that allow for prosperity.
Right.
They're about securing the waters. They're about getting a presence, a law enforcement presence out at sea.
Okay.
So how you get there is the challenge. And my argument was that, as I said before, you've got 200 miles of opportunity. That should, if you invest in it, if you invest in your offshore oil and gas or your offshore minerals or your fish, even if you don't want it for yourself, it's still potential business. Well, as it's a business, you've got to protect it. So the idea was to build that capability to get out there, know what's going on, have your information, have your picture, the ability to protect it. Now, if it's fish, if you're selling licenses, the only way you're going to get people to pay the right amount of money is if you give them value for money, protect the shipping. So protect the fishing, stop illegal fishing going on, control it so it's sustainable. And so a lot of it was, we talked a lot about fish. IMO obviously got a little bit, why are we talking about fish? That's Food and Agriculture Organization.
Yeah.
But it's going around the houses to get to where you want to be. So what's in it for me? The whole thing's about money. Yeah. And so if we could get the head of state to recognize that the massive potential of the blue economy, but in order to grow that and realize that potential, you have to protect it. Therefore, you should invest in maritime security as an enabler.
Do you think
You get the money back.
do you think the African stakeholders that are working on these issues have done a great job in communicating this strategic, valuable space to the leadership?
I think the fact that we had 13 actual presidents signing a maritime-related document was a cause for great optimism.
Right.
I'm not sure that we've kept up that pressure enough yet, and I think there's a lot of work needs to be done. The African Union is not configured to take maritime seriously enough.
Okay.
Most Doctrine, a lot of it is about agriculture, it's about land, it's about that. But my argument, I guess, is that if we could have more intra-African trade by sea, more manufacturing in Africa, selling processed fish rather than raw fish, processing working materials rather than just exporting raw materials. So you're increasing employment, you're increasing prosperity, you're building a sustainability in Africa. And it's a hard sell because many of the countries are more land focused. Security is seen as regime security.
Okay.
It's about protecting the state. It's about protecting the infrastructure. It's about protecting the government rather than protecting money making. And because there's no interstate maritime threat, like I said, the Ghanaian Navy isn't going to go and attack anybody.
Yeah.
The threat from the sea has been looked at from military terms, therefore it's not there, rather than law enforcement terms as an enabler. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's my point. And so it's quite a long argument. That's why I'm very keen to work again with MOWCA and get that economic message up the chain into the African Union and get the debate kicking on again.
Right.
And that's really where we were going with it. But there's been some good initiatives. Now, clearly, some countries are much more sea focused than others. The island states, some countries are. There have been some major successes. I mean, Kenya has taken it very seriously, created a coast guard, a lot of maritime governance laws, etc. Nigeria, the Nigerian Navy and NAMASA have been very good in terms of building that maritime security piece, using the Navy for maritime security, demonstrating some successful operations, working with other countries in the region as well has been good. So there has been some success. Has there been enough? Probably not. Well, certainly not. But it's all heading in the right direction.
What are your predictions in terms of the progress that in terms of progress for the Djibouti Code of Conduct and the Yaoundé Code of Conduct? Ultimately, what do you think is going to happen?
I think that what I think is going to happen, I think we're going to, with Djibouti Code, it's evolving into it's more of a governance structure for it. It's become more of it started as a commitment by governments to do stuff.
Okay.
Individual, my government says, I'm going to do this, 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 and this in order to do that. It's now, there's a very strong coordination body as mechanism. The working groups are looking at, the working group 1 is dealing with information sharing. So establishing information sharing protocols, networks, etc., encouraging each country to have an information sharing center within the country to coordinate between or share information between the different law enforcement agencies, etc. Working group 2 is dealing with capacity building. And some of the challenges there are a lot of the donors are coming in saying, I want you to do this, or this is what I'm offering you, rather than the countries going, this is what I need. And so to hop back, one of the things we've encouraged within both the Yaoundé Code and Djibouti Code is, first of all, the country needs to develop a national maritime strategy. What am I going to do with the wet bit? What am I going to do with that 200 miles of opportunity? How am I going to develop my coastal, my shipping, my ports, etc.? Then underneath that, a maritime security strategy, which obviously takes a lot from the Djibouti Code or Yaoundé Code on how I'm going to protect it, but then turn it into a business plan.
Okay.
What I need, I've got an EZ this big, I've got fish in it that are worth this number of billion if I do it sustainably. I need a capability to go out and patrol for this amount of time, carrying this amount of people, whether it is your helicopter operable or whatever. Build up this detailed, specific requirements for what I need to do.
Okay.
Then look at where you're going to get it from. So if it's patrol boats, build it in your own country with your own people. Don't go just get secondhand ones from somewhere, but actually get and work with your neighbors, regional cooperation to build a standard patrol boat that's going to meet the needs of several countries. That way you're building your shipping industry. You're employing local people, you're using local materials rather than developing on aid. And I think that a lot of the challenge is that you go to the minister and say, what do you want? Oh, I want boats. You're going to get a rust bucket. You're going to get some old piece of crap that I'm giving you because it's cheaper to give it to you than it is for me to pay for it to be recycled. Yeah.
Right.
So the working group 2 matrix, which basically is putting in on one side what the governments actually want, and on the other side is what the donors are offering. And if they match up, great. If they don't do it. So I think that's where that one's going. And the third one is the working group 3, which really came out of a recognition by navies that they can contribute more. If you look at what's happening, as I said, Yaoundé Code is largely military focus. There was a Chiefs of Navies meeting, I think, in Cape Town 2 years ago that said we could do something with Djibouti Code. So working group 3 is this operational coordination body to say how the civilians can work better with the militaries and vice versa. So that's a whole of government approach. So I see it going there. I think there's going to be a lot of stresses on it. I think the situation in the Gulf of Strait of Hormuz at the moment, which is affecting some Djibouti Code signatory states. That's having a devastating effect on the region. I think the whole geopolitical situation at the moment, back in 2013 when the Yaoundé Code came in, and 2009, we weren't on the brink of World War III. So navies were able to develop resources for civilian purposes. Now everyone's focusing on potential high-end warfighting and very little time for using navies for peaceful purposes,
Right.
Which I think is a challenge. I'm sure there's an element of diversification within different parts of the region will have different drivers, but that's fine. I think it's really if you stick to the underlying principle,
Right.
which is these codes are about creating national ability to sustainably exploit and protect the EZ, then great. When they develop a life of their own and become another layered mechanism that's competing against the IOC, or is competing against this initiative, or is competing against that, then it become a problem. I think it's important to remember what we're trying to actually achieve.
Right. So maritime security is not an end in itself. It's a means to an end.
Absolutely.
And this wealth creation
Yeah.
for
Exactly.
economies.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah.
I hope this message resonates with the African maritime community, or just the African continent, and also with the African Union. And in future, we hope that we'll see a lot of progress, and we could make meaningful contributions that also benefits enormously from our maritime space. So thank you very much
Thank you.
for sharing all this knowledge with us, and I hope that we can sit down again and continue the discussion, because obviously there's so much to talk about. But thank you very much.
Thank you very much,
Chris, and we'll talk again.
Thanks very much.
This is very cute. All right.